Oi, boa tarde. Como vai?
Okay.
Meus amigos e amigas. And I think that's the only Portuguese I'm going to be able to get in today, because today I'm talking about French with people who are really living it, not just learning it and then some. Let's do this. I know who you folks are, but I know a lot of people still need to be introduced, and we're gonna go from the bottom up. Maya, tell them who you are, where you are, what you do, and then some. If somebody's giving me a little bit of an echo, let me see who that is. I know a lot of people still need to be introduced, and we're gonna go from the bottom up. Somebody is echoing, so let's just move while the other person's talking. If somebody's giving me a little bit of an echo, let me see who that is. Who is that echo? Uh-oh, Maya. Somebody has the YouTube playing in the background? If anybody has the YouTube video playing in the background, you might want to kill that. No? Maya, do you have the YouTube video playing in the background? Somebody has the YouTube. There we go. Much better. All right, now we're safe. Maya, tell them who you are, where you are, how you got there.
Hello, so I'm Maya, and I'm an American au pair, but I'll be a student this fall in Paris. I will be studying music for the flutes and everything, and I'm 24 years old, and I've learned French since I was 12, so for 12 years and counting. And yeah, and so I got here last year when I got the opportunity to au pair for family, and then in Bordeaux initially. Then I changed families in Paris, and I've been here since October 2019 last year. And I'm going to do I'm in the process of renewing my visa here, because I know that in the European Union they're having a ban on American tourists right now. So I think pretty much only students and spouses can pretty much enter the U.S. enter the European Union, but still kind of complicated with the pandemic. But yeah, and so so that's how I kind of got here on a long-stay au pair visa, and I'm renewing it now. And so, and my long-term plans are to stay here, to study music and establish my music career and such.
So you're studying music in what city right now?
Paris.
In Paris, France. I visited Paris briefly. People, they weren't my favorite people in the world, but then again, I didn't speak French, so I can't hardly expect them to, to greet me with open arms, because my French was non-existent.
Yeah, I've heard that as a common theme. I guess I've heard that before. Basically, because I can speak French, I've had a pretty good time here. I haven't had any issues here. I mean, yeah, like there's some cases where I'd say I'm intermediate level in terms of French, but it's not not native level yet. But still, the fact that I can speak it has helped me a lot, because I can speak it, I guess. But yeah.
Right on. So, Rhody Ann.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I am Rhody Ann Thorpe, a Jamaican living in France. I came to France initially in 2011 as a student, but since 2015 particularly, I've been teaching English at a university here. And since 2 years now, I've been pursuing my PhD at the university in the north of France here. So I pretty much have had quite the experience as a student, as a teacher in France. So that's what I've been up to in France currently. It's really nice to meet you. And for Maya, it's quite interesting to know that you started out in Bordeaux, because that's where I did my studies initially. So that's pretty good. I hope you had a good experience.
Well, like the city, yeah, I'll just say that. I think I have more of a better experience in general in Paris, for sure, I'd say.
That's quite interesting.
Where are you in France?
Could you repeat that?
Where are you in France?
I'm currently in the north in Boulogne-sur-Mer. Not sure if you've heard of it. If you know where Lille is, I'm like an hour away from Lille by train.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Awesome.
And so let me do this then. Maya, I don't know if you have a social media that you'd like us to share. I don't know if you're out there like me and Rody, because we're all over the place, and here is where Rody is on LinkedIn if you want to find her professionally.
Thank you.
Because she started the Lengo Sul, and it's well, tell them about what you do. Tell them about what that is.
All right, so in 2016, I started a language travel entity, which is called Longsoul International. And the aim of Longsoul International is to make language travel accessible to all. So basically, I realized that, especially where Jamaicans are concerned, I wanted to, start the initiative to make language mastery a reality for a lot of people. So with Longsoul International, we design immersion programs where Jamaicans could go to, for example, France or even Panama to learn their target language. And similarly for other persons to come to Jamaica, or to go to Jamaica rather, for English, to learn English as a foreign language. So that's what I've been doing with Longsoul. It is a purely virtual enterprise. So persons can go on our website at longsoulinternational.com and see what the programs are like, whether there are even programs that we had for Brazil. So wherever people want to practice their language, we have immersion programs for that.
Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy. And I want to talk to you more. Perhaps this is a conversation we should have privately about what you do, excuse me, via Brazil, because I think there may be some crossover for us.
Awesome. Looking forward.
So let's do this. This is Brother Lawrence. Now Lawrence has just turned the corner because wait, Maya, can you do me a favor and mute real quick? I think you're echoing. I'm not sure. But with Lawrence, we talk mainly about, because everybody who comes to this channel, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't so far. I talk about three things. I talk about world travel quite a bit, not just my life in Brazil or my friend's life in France. I have friends all over the world, and we talk about those experiences. I talk about social events and social political issues with people, and I have a lot of friends from all over the world, and we talk about those things together. But one of the big things that we also talk about is, well, we talk about money. And Lars and I connected on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and he has this YouTube page, and he wanted to get it started on a few things, and his cryptocurrency information is pretty deep, and we've made money together, but he's a diverse person. He wanted to talk about a few other things. And I told him, well, why don't you talk about being a polyglot? He said, well, I'm not a polyglot. I said, well, how many languages do you speak? He said, well, let me think. There's English, Portuguese, another language. And I'm learning my French again. I said, slow down. That makes you a polyglot. Brother Lauren.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Laris Commando. I'm from Cameroon. And I'm living in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've been living here for 8 years now, I guess, and did my graduate course in computer system analysis, and just finished my postgraduate course in data science. And as WusefWateef said, we connected on cryptocurrency because that's what I'm really into. Learning, doing some more research on the blockchain technology, and to see how it could help our lives, and especially focused in for African people, because I think it's going to help us a lot, this technology, to make our lives better. And I accepted the challenge he talked about, and I said, I'm going to start sharing my journey to learning French with the people who are subscribed to my channel, and God helping, I'll go through and get to a reasonable level with my French studies.
Well, wait a minute. Can you, let's see how, let's rate, not rate, but you have two people who live in France. How far can you go in French with them right now? And I say this knowing I know none of it. How far can you go with where you are?
No, I can't.
I'll let Maya go. That's one.
Okay, so we can have a little like conversation.
No, Lord, try it. Just try it. You got to get in the habit of doing it, man. You go out there, you see me speak my broken Portuguese a little every day, getting better and better, but you can't be shy about it. For the people who are trying to learn languages, you can't be shy.
Yeah, I'm not shy actually. It's just that French. Okay, I'm going to introduce myself. Let me say. Bonjour, je m'appelle Laris Comando. J'habite en São Paulo, Brazil. I think. What else? I think that's the level I can go. But I can ask how someone is doing. And
Well, you can ask, and I reply, for example.
okay. Bonjour, mademoiselle. Comment
Bonjour,
allez-vous?
you can me tutoyer, but je vais bien, et toi?
Je veux bien aussi.
Super.
This is funny. I get nervous when I like start talking because I feel I'm not at that level yet, where I can hold a conversation.
So are you learning French by yourself?
Yeah. The same way I did with Portuguese.
So how do you do that? Do you like watch YouTube videos or?
Yes, and also the thing is, Cameroon is a bilingual country. The official languages are French and English. So I grew up in the English-speaking part of Cameroon, but I listen to French. I have people who speak French and all that. So, but I was lazy actually, so I didn't learn French because I would have learned that a long time ago. So I decided to take it up again because I think it's something interesting. And going back to Cameroon, which I intend to do, starting up a business, I'd like to reach everyone, like people who speak French and people who speak English, so that expands my horizon, so that's why I decided to go into this. Yeah.
Now, for me, and this is something that a lot of people who are on this channel know, I am a huge advocate of the Pimsleur method. Pimsleur, in my opinion, is probably, because I want to be clear, Pimsleur doesn't teach you any reading. They don't teach you any writing. They made their claim to fame that if you can get through 3 30-day sections with 30 minutes a day, which is kind of a lie because you have to take each 30-minute section. I do it twice, once in the morning and once in the evening. But if you do that, in every language that I know anybody who's ever even used Pimsleur in, if you do that in 3 months, you can literally get off your airplane and have a coffee level conversation with people. And I say coffee level conversation, meaning just a chat about nothing. And that's what Pimsleur really does. Because again, they only focus on getting into a situation to be able to start talking. I did a video about it, Hustling Portuguese. Okay. I'll put a link to it. And I think I shared this with you, Lars, because I'm a big believer in, I'm kind of dogmatic. When I decide that there is an approach to doing something that works, I just stick to it. I only use that method, and it has helped me immensely. Not that it's the only one, but how did you two learn French? Maya, Rodi?
So I learned French in a traditional classroom in middle school. So it is different. I've heard of the Pimsleur method before, but I actually have some of the older ones with German that I need to eventually start doing something. But I learned French in a traditional classroom, basically, and I've kept up with it, since then. Even at my old university, even when I stopped French for the year, when I got back into it, it's like I never left. So basically, I've always studied French in a traditional classroom. And I did some study abroad opportunities too. Like when I was in middle school, my French class and we went to Montreal, which is in Canada. We took a bus there. It was like during spring break. So even though I don't remember much about the trip, to be honest, because that was like over 2 years ago, it was still a valuable experience. And also, prior to me coming here long term, I did a study abroad trip at my old university. It wasn't, the class itself wasn't in French, but I still spoke French here because I was also a French major back then, in addition to being a music major as well. So, but yeah, and then with me, actually, I know some Italian. The Italian is a bit different because I did a free online class of Italian in 2018 or 2017, yeah. And then me studying Italian through that course, I was able to, like you said, have like a basic, coffee level conversation with people. Like about I would say like A2, so upper beginner level. And that was why I went for the opportunity to au pair in Italy for two summer months in 2018. And because I learned Italian that way, I was a bit more comfortable in terms of getting around. It's still obviously it's not nearly as advanced as my French is, but still, it's just that I learned it on my own.
Oh wow,
Wow.
that's pretty cool.
And also
Wow.
because there's a lot of musical terms in Italian, so that's another reason why I also decided to learn it, because I have like a better contextual understanding of what tenuto means, for example. But yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, pretty much.
We forget that, for those of us who get to live in country, we have such a unique advantage learning the language because, well, how did I learn numbers? By going to the market and accidentally ordering a kilo of bananas. You'll learn real fast. You'll learn real fast. And they go, are you sure you want that many bananas? Yeah. Or the difference between duas and dozi, 2 and 12. You'll learn real fast when they say, okay, here's your bill, and you're like, but I didn't, and they hand you this giant bag that you didn't order, and you'll figure it out.
I would say it's the same in French. Du and douze, they were pretty similar.
Yes.
12 were pretty similar.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rody, before you tell us how you learned, can you answer this question? I want to hear from everybody. I'm only bilingual. Can you read that for us, Rody?
Pardon? There's something that I'm to read, the more languages you learn?
You see it on the screen or no?
There's a question, let's learn Spanish TV?
Yeah.
The more languages you learn, does it get easier? That's the question, and that you want me to answer it first?
Yeah, tell us, is that answer, how do you answer that question? Because I'm only bilingual.
No, well, I have been learning Dutch and Spanish after learning French. And I think the fact that I've been able to grasp Dutch and Spanish, I think, is because I had initially learned French. So my answer would be yes. The more languages you learn, the easier it gets, because of course you're probably used to certain structures and the vocab. For example, some words in French and in Spanish are quite similar, the way they're conjugated as well. Once you know the structure and stuff like that, it's definitely easy. Where Dutch is concerned, because I'm a native English speaker, the root word for certain words, it definitely was easy for me to pronounce and to get, even by listening or just reading. So yes, the more languages you learn, it gets easier. I
agree as well, because like I said, with Italian and French, that is, Italian words are pretty similar in French as well. So I also agree. I think particularly it's easier if you learn languages that are from the same family, like the Romance languages. They're like French, Italian, German, English, and Spanish. And I would say also maybe Portuguese as well, because that's pretty similar to Spanish and Italian. Of course, they're going to get easier, but I'd say if you go from French and you try to learn Korean or Japanese, then it will get easier. Yeah.
Wow.
I think if you learn languages, multiple languages in the same family, it should get.
Yeah. I think like Spanish and French are from the Latin family.
Yeah.
And there you go. So yeah, absolutely, it's gonna be easier.
Well, for me, I can listen to people speak any language that is not Spanish, because hearing Spanish will screw up my Portuguese. If that makes sense to anybody else.
Yes, definitely. My brother speaks English and French, And learning Portuguese, sometimes he mixed, like, he said some French words instead of like saying stuff in Portuguese, and that happens to me a lot. Even when I started like talking with some French friends, and I'll say something, and then all of a sudden I'm speaking Portuguese rather than French, and I'm like, okay, this is complicated for me, you know. So, so it's really but it gets easier, I guess, when you because my level in French is not that great. So I think that's more confusing. So I believe if I when I go like do a deep dive and learn more, I'll have that way of separating stuff in my head before going right into it, you know. So I think, but learning multiple languages, when you learn your first language in the second, it gets way easier for you to pick up any other language.
Yeah.
So, Rodi, how did you begin your French journey?
Similar to Maya, in a pretty traditional context, in high school, in a Jamaican classroom. So I learned French from Jamaican nationals. I think I got my first native teacher probably when I don't know if you guys, how you would equate that in the US system, but for me it was in lower six. So I guess that would be like 17 years old. When we actually had native French teachers in the classroom. But I think especially where the learning experience really started for me was when I actually got to France, because I found that, I was learning French from Jamaicans for so long, and here I was actually learning from native speakers. So the accents and the way they spoke, the expressions they would use, how fast, the rate at which they spoke. I think it was really in France that I kind of really got going.
And so here is where I really want to get into some of the beefier parts of being an expat and traveling to other countries where we're speaking a language that is not the one we were born speaking. Because I know after I've lived in about 15 countries, and Portuguese was the only language I was interested in learning, Brazilian Portuguese, because, and shout out to people who don't know that Brazilian Portuguese and Portugal Portuguese are two totally different languages. I found out that America doesn't treat people coming in speaking a second language nearly as nicely as even the worst of other countries do.
Wow.
Like, I remember being in France, and when they realized I couldn't speak French, people would just look at me and roll their eyes and maybe grunt through helping me or just walk away. But I never felt anger. Like, who are you? And I'm just gonna, like, it was weird. It was weird. How were you two received? And Lawrence, as someone coming in learning Portuguese, how were you received? Like, what is your first impression integrating into a society? Because I can tell people all the time, when you get past that hump, and I always call it the coffee table hump, when you get to the point where you're over the mountain and you can have a regular, just simple conversation, a country opens up to you and people open up to you in a way that they can see you're struggling, but they don't mind helping you. How did that work for you, Maya?
I feel like my answer is totally gonna be different because, again, I have a pretty strong, I guess, understanding of the language. So even if I don't say something idiomatically correct, or like, if I even make like a small like grammar mistake in terms of, like tense wise, because I'm still, I guess my brain is still getting used to the English French, conversion, I'd say, whenever I speak to people. As long as I still make the effort, it's like high enough effort, I guess, it's fine at least, and you still understand what I'm saying regardless. If I have I don't make like terrible mistakes, but like occasionally, I make, especially if I'm thinking in English. If I'm thinking in French, then it's much easier. But if I'm thinking in English, then my mind has to take a few seconds to think in French, or get into French mode, I'd say, in order to to, I guess, really convey what I want to say. Because when I'm in English mode, then I'm more likely to, make speaking mistakes. But if I'm in French mode, there's, no mistakes at all, really. So, yeah, I feel like, I've never had people like, because I can speak French and high enough, in a high enough manner. If they ever make mistakes or something like that, and they usually don't correct me, or I think they also may sense that I may have made a mistake, but it's not like I mean, still regardless, they still know what I want to say in a way, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's really difficult because I think it helps. Again, in my case, that I came already knowing a lot of the language and the culture. It helps know the culture too, because even if you know the language, sometimes some stuff that you don't understand or aren't aware of until you get here. It's helpful to know because, like for example, pharmacies here, or most stores here are closed on Sundays, obviously. At least, so I think when I came here, obviously I already knew that. So I think the people who didn't know that, it's like an intense, culture shock because they're so used to being able to go to like a convenience store like 7-Eleven or like Sundays when most stores aren't usually open on Sundays. So yeah, I think I guess in terms of situations like that, like in my experience, I don't have, I guess, I've never really had any major communication issues because I already know you have a good command of the language, I say.
I found the smallest effort goes a long way while trying to speak a foreign language in public. The native speakers respond well in my experience. Yeah, Brother Craig and I are both working our way through the Portuguese language, so yeah, I can definitely relate to that. We got a quick question again from Let's Learn Spanish Television. He said, could you suggest a few techniques to train your brain to think in the target language? I'll tell you what I had to do. I have this gear and I'll push it from one side to the other. It's like if I'm speaking in Portuguese, it's like a roller coaster. I can keep going with momentum. But if someone starts saying something to me in English, or if I click on a YouTube video in English, it goes and hits the brakes and goes back to English, and it's really hard. Because I'm not at the point where a lot of my friends are, where they can talk to one guy in Portuguese, then talk to me in English, and have two conversations going just like three of us are standing there. My brain has to okay, what are we speaking? So if I wake up in the morning and I talk to my Brazilian friends, I had to make an entire group of friends who only speak Portuguese because my Brazilian friends who speak English, I have to threaten with violence if they don't stop speaking English. Like, you can't do this to me because they're like, yeah, but I can speak English. I'm like, no, that's not the point. Who else has some feedback on Rody? What tips can you give Let's Learn Spanish TV?
So the techniques to train your brain to think in the target language. I mean, I think it all comes down to how exposed you are to the language. I think if you are continuously surrounded by, I don't know, people who are either Hispanophones or Francophones, and if you happen to be speaking French or Spanish every day, then I think it's just going to happen. And I think growing up and learning French, they always said the moment you know that you're comfortable in a language is when you start dreaming in the language. And that moment probably didn't happen to me until I was in college, where I had my first dream in French, and I was actually arguing with somebody in my dream. But it's just to say, it just because I was in France, I was immersed in the culture, I was, talking to people in French every day, that moment eventually came. So I think if you want to think, or if you want to have your dream in the target language, you have to be as exposed as possible, as much as possible to it.
And you have to another thing too. You have to also speak a lot too. I know it's something that I need to do too, because especially because I wanted to take the French language test basically for C1. Since I was going to do initially B2, that's for my level, but I took the test de connaissance du français earlier this year, in February before the pandemic, and I got B2 for that. And it doesn't expire till in 2 years, but I think I eventually should train to do the DELF C1 level test because I will need that for graduate school here. And just why not?
For the people who need a reference, that's what she's talking about.
Yeah,
that's the chart. So currently I'm B2, which doesn't surprise me. Obviously that's the level that I want, but C1 is really the native. Well, C1 and up. So C2 is technically, I guess, native level, but C1 is also like lower native level as well. I'd say. And but yeah, definitely, I guess speaking a lot in the language helps because you'll improve your pronunciation as well. I mean, I don't have like terrible pronunciation. I've never said l'amour et l'envers, for example, but still, it still helps to practice your pronunciation and also listening. I find that just the longer I've been here, yeah, I used to think that Koreans speak, so fast, but now that I've been here a long time, I don't think they speak very fast anymore. It's kind of like
Yeah.
normal pace, or sometimes fast, and I'll still understand it. It's not as fast as I thought it was like 10 years ago. So it's a sign that I've improved a bit, but and also, I mean, I guess it's kind of, this is what I do. To watch your favorite shows or movies in your target language. I find that that's helpful, and then maybe the vocabulary that you don't know, write down the words that you don't know, and then just look them up, and try to get the definition of that word in your target language. But if you can't, possibly write it in your native language. But I find that watching my favorite films, like I thought, it shows in French has helped me, particularly learning slang. I still don't well versed in slang yet. My French education has been too formal, so I don't know how to say some idiomatic expressions yet. But at least watching, for example, I watched Stranger Things in French on Netflix, so that was pretty helpful. I would say because I don't know. It also helped me. It also trained my listening as well, and yeah, and also reading the newspaper. They still, I guess, make newspapers here. That could also help too, especially in the pandemic. My host family just had like their newspapers delivered to their house, so that was something I probably should have taken more advantage of. But I find that particularly reading newspapers like Le Monde or L'Express, yeah, and and the like. I think that those are probably a good place to start. I'd say.
Yeah.
What else? And yeah, and I think I don't know. Like maybe try to also make friends in the people who speak your target
That's
language.
the one I was hoping for first. Make some friends.
Huh?
I was hoping you would say that first. Make some friends.
Yeah, because especially like unless like, with me particularly, that's why I kind of sure why. I mean, I haven't met a ton of Americans here since the whole
Good.
I haven't met a ton.
Stay away from Americans. I'll start. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I would prefer to meet French people at least. Even if it's like slowly at a time. Because the way I guess they make friends here in America is different. I think in Australia they're more closed off to people who don't know, but if they trust you, then obviously they get friends. So it's a matter of just finding the right people. And also, I was planning on doing more social events to meet more people, even the French people during in the springtime. But obviously, the pandemic, kind of dashed that goal. So and still, I say like make friends with people who are who speak your target language because they'll you can learn some stuff from them. I'd say. And
That's an excellent. That's an excellent way to look at it because you all got to share tools. But what about you, Lars? What tips do you have?
Well, I think for me it was not that difficult because when I first got to Brazil, I lived with a family, a Brazilian family, and like they almost didn't speak English, So I was immersed from the very beginning to the with the in the language, and this really helped because everywhere I turned, I only heard Portuguese, and like I think it's Roddy said, in the first few months, you listen and everyone is speaking so fast, and then you say, man, am I going to pick this up? And then with time your brain starts getting used to, and you start like listening more, and you become really accustomed to the language, and then boom, no one speaks fast. So, and one thing that helped me is that after 6 months of living with them, I got into the university. So I had very little knowledge about the language as compared to what I'm supposed to have while studying. So what I did for about a year was go to the library every day after my classes. I'd find the books in English, I'll read them so that I can understand, and then I read the ones in Portuguese so that I could be able to do the test. So I did this for about a year. Every day after classes, I had about 2 to 3 hours to do this. So that was like what helped me. And my friends in class, sometimes the teacher says something and I don't understand. And I was like, I didn't understand that. And then the guy will have to explain to me, oh, she said this, and he tries to look for smaller terms in order to explain the concept. So this really, really helped me. My friends were really supportive. And man, it's making new friends, is getting immersed in the language, and making new friends really help. Friends really, really, really help me. And reading something, um, at least every day, because I read the newspaper. Like I take the train, so we have this guy who distributed newspapers. So when I'm in the train, I'm reading the newspaper to see if I can get like a really good understanding of what it's saying. And then I get to school, and it's just getting yourself in contact with the language as much as possible. And I really think you moving to a country where this language is spoken is one of the greatest ways to learn. You know,
Mm.
I've seen a few people in Brazil. I have a few friends who I worked with who speak perfect English, even though they haven't traveled out of Brazil. But that's very rare, to find that. So I think it's really incredible for someone to be able to learn a language without actually being surrounded by people who speak this language. So for me, it was just getting myself immersed in this language, learning every day, reading and watching movies, listening to music. Music was one of the greatest things that happened to me, because I listened to a lot of music, especially the old time music, like they sang at a slower pace than what's happening today. So like the old school was really, really, really great. So this is some of the things that I did that helped me a lot. And I always, like, I use the Pimsleur. This Pimsleur helped me too, because I put it on my headset and I'm repeating, because I found out you cannot learn the language by just listening.
Right.
You need to
Right.
repeat the language, and Pimsleur teaches us how to pronounce the words as they are. So sometimes I'm in the train and I'm talking, and people are like, what's he doing? He's repeating some words in Portuguese, and like, it's something strange, but you have to put in the work, in order to get it. So those are some of the things I did to get to where I am, without being a student in a traditional Portuguese class. I didn't go to any school for Portuguese and all that. I just got it on my own, with friends and at the university. So that was a really great experience for me.
Now, here is something interesting that I want to go into. First, I want to read what Craig said. Is there a difference between Canadian French and French, assuming from France? I've heard Canadians are doing it wrong, LOL. First, let me do this. Has anyone here had experience in Canadian French?
In terms of, well, I've been to Montreal, Canada, where Canadian French is spoken. Yeah, and we learned about the differences between like French and Canadian French. There's like, for example, some of the vocabulary, like some of the words that you can use that you would normally use in French in France, that you can't use in, Montreal, Quebec, because they have a different word for that same thing, if that makes sense. And also, apparently, well, this is kind of sort of true, I guess, when I was there, that French people from France think that French Canadians sound like, Dutch when they speak French, apparently. And because, I feel like, well, even when I was in French class in high school, this teacher, was telling us how I guess there are certain deep differences between languages that sometimes people from France treat French Canadians a bit differently, because I think that from what I remember, my teacher said that some French people from France think that their French is better than Canadian French, and so that's why sometimes.
Before we go further, how do I pronounce this guy's name? The guy on the screen who just left us a comment. How do I say his name?
Jean-Luc Merle, Jean's definitely a French name. Luckner or Luc Merle, that would be a French first name. And Derrida.
Well, hey, no matter how you pronounce your name, Jean, thank you for popping in. I appreciate you showing up. Please make sure you share this on your Facebook and make sure you click subscribe. And he said, yeah, there's an accent and difference in some words are different as well. Oh, there we go. There we go. So here's where I want to go with this. And I think, Rody, I think you have the echo. So just mute until it's your turn to chat. So I think the echo is somehow coming through yours. But let's do this. Here's something I have found with languages that are spread across different countries and continents. And this is where a little classism and some interesting thing comes into play. From what I've learned about, for example, even the difference between, I have Canadian cousins and friends who speak French. And he said, yeah, his name is French. Versus people I know from France who speak French. And there is definitely a classist issue. They definitely see people who don't speak French, or more importantly, Parisian French, as somehow beneath them or a bastardization of their language. And Maya earlier talked about, for example, learning French slang. Whereas in Brazil, and Lars, I want you to jump in on this with me as well, because you're deeper into the language than I am. I have found that when I started learning Portuguese, one of the things that I decided was I wouldn't want to speak in another language any differently contextually than I do in English. What I have been told by my friends who are other businessmen that I do business with and people of that ilk is that they're extraordinarily glad that I don't use slang and that I don't use incorrect Portuguese, because that's something that is a class marker that you want to avoid, just like it is in English. We understand, like I have friends who will see something cool on television or in a movie and they'll say, what does this mean and how can I use it? And I have to explain to them, sure, I can tell you exactly what that means. The problem is, once you start speaking that way, people are going to assume that you're of what they would say in the movies, low birth. And thanks, bro, brother, for stopping by again. I really appreciate you contributing so much these past couple of days, especially. Do everybody a favor. Make sure you do like the field general here. BK from Rocky says to everybody, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment, because that's how we get to meet so many new people, including folks from Haiti.
Yeah.
So have any of you run into that where you learn very quickly that it's not simply speaking the language, but using or avoiding certain contexts of speech? You avoid certain class issues that definitely pop up.
In Portuguese, that happened. I used to teach English at a school. So one time, the guy, the owner of the school, her brother said something to me, and I was just at the beginning stages of learning. So this guy said something. He said "noise vai," and my brain didn't really click, because that's not when we use noise. We conjugate the verb, So this guy said "noise vai," and then I went back to school and I asked my friends. I said, "Listen, this guy yesterday, he's a Brazilian. He speaks Portuguese, and he said this. So is that correct? Because I know it isn't." And they told me, no, that's for people who, they say, they call it in Portuguese, quebrada, like people who are from like the hood, He said, no, that's Portuguese for people who from the hood, Don't say that. Don't use that. And there's one thing in Portuguese, the Portuguese spoken by the Brazilians at most of the times is different from what is written. So, you also have to, like you said, you need to be careful with what you pick, like when you're speaking Portuguese, because you can listen to someone and you say, oh, this is a Brazilian speaking Portuguese, and at the learning stage you're taking something that's not proper. When I say that's not proper, it means like you use some terms which are not acceptable in like the office space, or workspace, in the work. It's different.
But you may not know that, and that's why you have to be very, and this is, and I want to call a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is, and you often have to look at classism and how learning a language will affect you as far as how you're presented to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very big deal in Brazil, especially.
Yeah.
That's an extraordinarily big deal. Do you guys run into that in France?
I can probably. Is there still an echo on my end? Or is it
Hello?
okay?
No, go for it. I think we're okay as long as you're the only one talking.
Okay, got it. No, I think generally, as I would just probably agree with Laris in terms of language being definitely contextual. There are certain things that are appropriate based off different contexts. But in terms of, I've probably only ever been corrected in the beginning stages when maybe a few years ago when I was having a conversation with someone, a professor at university. This is when it was in my first year at France. And I was explaining a situation and I said, I don't know how to, basically I was saying I'm Nick, which I guess would be like a dude. And the professor he corrected me and said, no, it's more appropriate to say anga, like a guy, so I guess from then I realized, okay, maybe there's some words that people find more fitting based off a different context and to whom you're speaking to. But generally, I think I never really learned slangs as such, so I think I never really got in any problems. Anything I learned here, I probably would have learned from classmates and stuff, but I quickly learned how to distinguish between what should be said in a public context and what I can say between friends.
Yeah. I did Brody too because I pretty much learned the formal French way, and it was only recently that I'm getting to learn a little bit of slang, but I don't really use it anyway. Because to be fair, I think I don't use a lot of slang in English, so I think that's why. But yeah, so I never had issues with either. I usually speak, very formal, just because that's always how I've been and how I was taught and things like that, and so. I think it will be useful to know what slang is, just to know what it means, obviously. But in terms of using it, I don't use slang.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It changes things when you realize, how quickly we can judge each other based on the words that we use, and it's not a fair system, but it is the system that's in play. And you want to make sure you make a very clear separation between who you can be. Because remember, we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with being immigrants, right? Not just expats, but immigrants. And we're also dealing very clearly with, and you're Black. And that's something we can never pretend doesn't exist. We can't behave as if that doesn't matter. It matters. So we have to choose, just like in real life, what we take in. For example, when I listen to Portuguese that's not my classes, I like philosophy, so I end up listening to people who clearly I'm struggling at best. I'll give you a quick example of one of the channels that I look at. Laris, I don't know if this is somebody that you're in, but
let me see. Provocações. No, I haven't.
Conversations, philosophy. And I mean, my brain hurts I have to play it slow sometimes. I'll reduce the speed to like 30% slower, so it goes at 70, and it gets in there. I'll
check that out. I haven't heard of it before, at all. I'll definitely check it out.
So then oh, by the way, you had a quick question. I think we maybe answered it earlier, but we want to go for that.
Oh, okay. I'm from Cameroon. I'm from Cameroon.
Oh wow, wow! Look at this comment. Judge Zilla the Beast said, "Think of Cambridge English and the Mississippi drawl." Are you familiar with the word drawl, Lars?
No.
Okay. Are you familiar with the word drawl? Being from Jamaica, I don't know if that's something, Rhodey. I don't know if that's something. That word drawl.
No.
Have you ever heard the stereotypical accent, Sataki, that someone from the deep south of the United States has?
Yeah.
That's a drawl. I have a cousin who's a PhD who wrote a paper. After writing this paper, he was approached by 2 universities to come and give speeches on the paper that he'd written. When they called him to confirm the dates, they heard that he had a deep Alabama drawl and withdrew.
Really?
Yep.
Oh man.
I mean, that's real. That's real. That happened. Because people are so, like, there are very famous actors that have deep accents who end up having to go to classes to lose it.
Really?
Yep.
That's new.
Yeah, that's a real thing. That's a very real thing, because it's one of those, as much as we like to believe otherwise, we still carry so many prejudices towards the way people speak. I'll give, he said, Southerners have a drawl.
Y'all.
Academia is well known for hosting talks based on someone's speaking accent. Unfortunately, that's true. That's true. And Real Brother actually said, I should say typically, many don't. When it's there, however, it's very prevalent. Yeah. 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 I mean, and then you get into those issues with language. First, let me do this. And Lars, this is something else that may benefit you. I don't know. When I talk about, I do my best to listen to brutally high-level Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Leandro Carnal?
No.
Yeah, he gets in there. Philosopher. Again, it's one of those, it's going to hurt. It's definitely going to hurt when I have to listen to it. But I force myself to, because I also listen to his pronunciation. You know, to go even deeper, one of the things that I had to factor in is moving to São Paulo, Brazil, which is known as the education and financial capital. My Portuguese accent is of a São Paulo accent, a Paulista accent, and I understand people who have a Rio de Janeiro accent are looked at sideways. There's a lot. How would you describe the way people are received, even a business professional, if they come with a Rio de Janeiro accent? Lars?
Well, what you said is true. You know, when you listen to someone who's from Rio de Janeiro, this is typical. Like, this is some stereotypical stuff in Brazil that people who come from Rio de Janeiro, or people who come from the northern part of Brazil, have this accent, and you can listen. When you listen to it, you know, he opens his mouth, and you know this person is not from Sao Paulo. And when the Brazilians who from Rio de Janeiro, when they speak, it's clear, like, because they have some sounds they push. They have the way they pronounce their S is different from the way we in Sao Paulo pronounce it. So it's something like you. And people in Sao Paulo always like, this guy is from the north. They're like, don't mind this guy. He's from the north. Or this guy is from Rio de Janeiro. And they have this way to look. I don't know if it's like looking down on these people because of their accent.
Yes, it is.
they look down on these guys, and they're like, so because I had a friend in when I was in the doing my graduate course, he was from the north. Anytime he opened his mouth to talk, people in class laughed. I didn't understand until I got to know the difference between the accents and all that, because it was strange. I was like, "Why are you guys laughing?" I said, "Can't you, don't you listen? Can't you get the accent?" I said, "No, it's speaking Portuguese, so same as you guys." And I said, "No, no, it's different, you know." And then later on, I came to discover that his accent was actually different. So I did, like, I was just here for about 7 months by then, so I didn't know the difference between this. But they actually looked down and they laughed. They laughed at him. They laughed at him in class.
It's really awful.
Yeah, it was strange. I was asking, why are you laughing? This guy is like answering a question, and everybody, the laugh. I'm like, what's happening? They said, listen, his accent. He's from the north. I'm like, so what? You know, so, and this guy actually left. He actually left, and he went to do another course or something, I guess. So
well, now here is where I might lose some folks. Here is where this is going to get a little difficult, because I'm going to say some things that I believe to be true, though I am always open to disagreement. Okay? We have a comment here from Judge Zilla the Beast. Elocution is tied to perceived intellect, unfortunately. The problem is elocution and the ability to speak well is directly tied to level of education. We can't separate those two, and we can't pretend like it doesn't exist. The unfortunate reality is something I learned. My parents were blue-collar, regular people who, my dad came back screwed up from Vietnam, alcoholic, they had drinking problems. I grew up, fortunately enough, never abused, never hungry. My parents took care of me even when they were going through their issue. But here's the problem. My parents knew enough. For example, I was born with a lisp. My tongue is too big for my face. My grandmother, who was 65 when I was born, had been a public speaker. I spent countless hours reading books in front of her, paragraph by paragraph, over and over again until I could speak it perfectly with no accent and no lisp. My mother, my first memories with my mother were of her reading to me, and she would read a word, then I would read a word. And as I grew, it was she would read a paragraph and I'd read a paragraph. My father was giving me books well above my reading level to just keep pounding me in the head with them. Because something I learned once I hit high school age is that they couldn't give me a fortune, they couldn't give me a family name that people feared, but my ability to speak well is what separated me from my contemporaries. The fact that, you know, I would get a ruthless beating from my mother if I spoke anything other than correct English. I had friends that, and this is something that so many Black people can relate to, I never got to sound like I was cool. However, by the time I hit 18 and went to college, the advantages it gave me, even now, people who know what I do for a living, I do editing, copy editing, proofreading. Well, here, let me show you guys something else, because I don't know if this might be new for a lot of people. If you want to catch me on LinkedIn, by the way, that's my professional. But what I've been doing lately is, and this is something that's a separation from what I've been doing in the past, for people who want to come to Brazil, and I still have friends that do this in the Dominican Republic and other places, I set people up, particularly Americans. My company helps people with visas and residency and all those documents you need to move legally to Brazil. That's what I do professionally as one of my other businesses. And for the record, I tell people all the time, don't look at my resume. That's a fun thing. Always look at, and this is with anybody, you always look at their references first. You look at who's willing to put their name on them professionally. These are the people who know me professionally and they're willing to say, yeah, this guy is legit. Definitely hire him. So I say that to say this. One of the biggest advantages I had is by my family understanding that I would be judged and judged harshly if I spoke anything other than clear, correct English. Because it does matter. Elocution may or may not be an indicator of intellect, because how can we decide intellect? I'm not quite sure. But it can definitely show you whether or not you're educated, whether or not it's formally, whether or not, you know, your ability, my ability to communicate complex ideas simply because I have enough words to do it, are what gave me my freedom. I walked away from the United States at 37 years old permanently. I've lived in a bunch of countries because I worked in the financial industry. I wasn't smarter than other guys that I worked with, but my ability to communicate to a client a financial product easily and accurately with the right words brought me more clients, which made me enough money to walk away from the United States with no debt and 2 businesses. So I don't know how you guys feel about that. I've had arguments with people that I care about that. It's just BK said something. He said, your upbringing allows you to code switch when needed. That's absolutely untrue. I was never allowed to not speak clear and correct English. Alone, with friends, in front of my parents, standing in front of the mirror brushing my teeth. There was never a code switch. It was not beaten into me, but pounded into my psyche. This is who you are, regardless of what anybody else says. We are in agreement. The unfortunate are the folks like your PhD cousin. Yeah, I have a cousin with a PhD, way more educated than I ever want to be. And a lot more debt too. But he can't do public speaking because of that. It's a weird. Brother Craig says, I had an elocution lessons in middle school. My strong Long Island accent was looked at as a hindrance outside a certain circle. It's real. How do you guys feel about that? Who wants to jump into that pile of mud that I just scraped together? Oh, everybody's silent now.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how exactly to approach that because I had a completely different experience in the sense where in Jamaica, for example, we have patois, which I could probably consider maybe even my first language, but at the same time, like there was never a distinction at home, like patois is improper or whatever. Like the fact that I speak like this, to be honest, it wasn't forced on me by my parents. It just happened, to be honest. So I can't say, but in terms of it being a marker of intelligence, let's say, I think you definitely can't necessarily, you can't separate it, I think. The fact that you are able to speak well, it doesn't mean that you have a PhD, for sure. But I think it does say something, in terms of what you have up here. So I definitely see it being, you can definitely justify it as a marker of intelligence.
Well, for me, it's different, because back in Cameroon, like I said, I grew up in the English-speaking part of the country, and we have this language called Pidgin, which is spoken in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Cameroon, and it's considered as bad English, Pidgin. So my parents always didn't want us to speak Pidgin. They're always like, you have to speak English. You have to speak English. So we grew up in a house where English was but I spoke Pidgin, I learned how to speak Pidgin with my friends. I speak Pidgin and all that. But when it comes to scenarios in working scenarios, you have to go with English, So there are some things which there are some errors which we make in English, which are gotten directly from Pidgin, So Pidgin influences our English, but in Cameroon we didn't see most of what YusefWateef is explaining, because since everyone is used to these languages, this like you said, Roddy, we don't. There might be situations or scenarios where people look down on the other person because he doesn't have sufficient English skills, but not to a great extent like what they're saying happens in the United States, So I think that is a little bit different, from where I come from my country, Cameroon. And the only thing we have there is people who speak French think they're better than people who speak English, So that's something that happens often, most often than not in Cameroon.
Wow. Judge Zilla said to Craig, think about having a Scouse, Irish, or Scotch accent in London. I lived in London, and I worked with a woman who she was Glaswegian, meaning she was from Glasgow, Scotland. She was the most terrifying woman I've ever known. If we weren't working together, I would have definitely asked her out on a date. And the worst thing about it is the more angry she got, the less I could understand. So if something was going wrong or had to be done, she'd be talking and I'd be like, I don't understand what you just said. What the fuck? And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm your friend here. I'm your friend. We just need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Wait, what'd you say? And it was just, woo. She was normal all the way until something started to go a little crazy and she would just literally become unintelligible. And I got to see what that was like when I listened to some of the people I know who were born and bred in London say some of the most awful things about people. And you find out very, very quickly. When you move to Europe, most people hate the English. They really are nobody's friend. I mean, even white Europeans are like, no, we want to kill them all. Whoa. Or even the Cockney accent being spoken in Essex. Maya, were you ever looked at and seen any class markers in the way you were brought up speaking or the way that you speak now?
I've definitely seen like, class markers in terms of speaking, and in terms of, I guess with me, I guess in my own family, I mean, I'd say, I don't know, like, well, we were definitely brought up to like be polite. So I guess, being polite, I guess, when you say certain things, like there's no other way for you to say it except for, to be polite, I guess, if that makes sense. And so you shouldn't really use slang if you're trying to be polite with somebody. And so, I don't know, I feel like, and also me and my sister, we didn't really have an interest in speaking in slang anyways to our parents or to, our friends in that matter. So like, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. But I definitely noticed the differences between people who, who speak well and people who don't. I think that's definitely, that's the class differences are definitely evident in that matter for sure. And I think it's also, like I said, it's evident here too in France because, I've been told, by French people that I speak very, very well. And I think it's not just because of my pronunciation. I think it's also how I speak. I don't, like I said, I don't use slang words and things like that. So I think it's, I don't know. Yeah. I think it's like my habits in English kind of sort of translate into my habits in French, I'd say.
So here's where I'm going with this, and some of you could smell what I was cooking a mile off. Right now, we have on screen three different countries of Black people. I've seen that for better or for worse, my learning Portuguese has been seen as more forgivable than our Black brothers and sisters from other Black countries. That because I'm learning Portuguese, but I'm Black American, I'm forgiven for things that my Black friends will say the Congo simply aren't.
Yeah, that's true.
Is someone cooking lunch in the background?
What?
Sounds like somebody's cooking lunch in the background. In any case, have you seen the way you were treated as a Black Jamaican in France differently from someone who may be from, I don't know, Cuba or, Nigeria?
Well, that's a very interesting thing because I think the French will, like when I say the French, just generally speaking here, they have had history with the states in the African continent. So they have had, as Laura said earlier, with colonization. So we still have what used to be the French Africa. So we have persons in France, for example, from Senegal, from Cameroon, and other countries where French probably was either taught or it was even maybe a first language for some. But in terms of so people probably have had experiences with Francophone Africans, but I think for me persons who have met me, or well, French or European persons who have met me, I've usually been met with a sort of curiosity, mainly because I'm Jamaican. And like, for example, I meet somebody, maybe they'll immediately, if I meet an African guy, he'd probably ask, oh, are you from Senegal? And likewise, perhaps when they see me, they'll assume that I'm from another African state. But then when I say, no, I'm from Jamaica, then they're like, oh, Bob Marley and Usain Bolt. And they start asking me all sort of questions about, you know, the countries. There's that kind of curiosity, but it's never been anything pejorative. It's never been anything negative, no negative vibes, just fine.
Maya, Laris?
For me personally, wait, what was the question again? the question?
Laris, take it away. I should have to take our cue from you.
Yeah.
Okay, but like I said, YusefWateef, that what you said is true. You get treated. Okay, for example, I've been in situations where I go to a place and I speak in English, and they're like, oh, okay, so you speak English and all that. And then once I say I'm from Africa, from Cameroon, they're like, you know, so so it's definitely true. When I speak Portuguese nowadays, they actually they ask, when someone asks, oh, how did you learn? I said, okay, I learned in Brazil and I studied. And then I said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Cameroon, Africa, do you know? And all that. And then they say, but you speak too well for an African. I'm like, what does that mean? If I speak Portuguese too well for an African? Because the other Africans I know don't speak this good and all that. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. I know of Africans who speak Portuguese better than you, who's a Brazilian, and you're telling me. So I think this is something that's real. You know, you go to a place and you actually see the difference in, like you said, you're forgiven for some of the errors you make because you're American, you're a Black American, and the Black Africans aren't because they're from Africa. And I think it's based on what they think and the way they perceive Africa, you know. So I think it has everything to do with that, you know, which is something I would say I don't like. I don't find it. How can I put this in the right way?
How about clearly and honestly? Just say it.
I used to find this offensive at first, but now I just think to myself, the person is ignorant, or that's just what I just put that in my head, to get it over with. Like, no, this person is doing this because they're ignorant, they know nothing, so just go on, you know. So for me, that's it.
Wow. Yeah, I was in a situation in a restaurant with a group of friends, and the waiter came over, and I knew what I was ordering. What did I order? What's my usual? I said, você tem... What did I order? What do I always order? Suco de limão sem açúcar, você tem cheese... What did I order? Cheeseburger, something simple, like a frango passarinho, something simple. And the waiter said something back to me, and I immediately froze. And my buddy kind of nudged me under the table to shut up. And then he said something to the guy, and the guy walked away. And all my confidence in Portuguese went away. I said, oh my goodness, I couldn't understand what he said. I feel like an idiot. I thought I knew what I was talking about. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to talk to you in English because this is really important right now. He said, you have to remember that the level of education that someone who works at one of these restaurants has means you're probably getting a better education in Portuguese language than many citizens do here. And that made my head explode. That's when they explained to me, one of the awful things about the way people from the North are treated is they built the city. When the cities in particularly the South and Southeast, were being built as these big empires, who did they bring in? They brought in people from the deepest, most countryside regions with the least amount of education. They built all these famous things that you see here, yet their class of people were never allowed to integrate fully into the educational system because, like most day laborers, they were never paid enough to change their lives. So they're stuck being waiters in some of the world famous restaurants that they helped build. They're stuck being the porteros. A portero is a doorman job. You literally are the guy that buzzes people in, or if I got a package and I'm not home, that's where they're stuck. And that made my brain just, yet people have the audacity to look at them as if, well, they're lesser than. You know, it's, I always talk about the privilege of language, you know. Most Americans don't realize this, and Maya, you might want to jump in on this. Most Americans don't realize just being able to speak more than one language is such an enormous thing.
Yeah.
To even have conversations, you know?
Yeah, because most of them, and this is from my personal experience, not just, you know, observing stuff, but, you know, I started, you know, French when I was 12, right? And as, you know, the years went by in school, middle school and high school, the more I advanced in French, the less of my peers continued, you know, with me. So, like, you know, it ended up basically being, you know, people that I did French with, you know, from middle school, with like 10 people initially. And now it's like, you know, like 3 or 4 people. So, and I think, I think it's like, you know, especially it's pretty common. I'd say the reason why I chose to, you know, continue French and, you know, continue basically using language to this day is because I have an actual love for the language and the culture. Like, you know, when I took French in middle school and high school, I always got A's in French, always. My first B was actually at my old university, but that's not here or there. But yeah, so I feel like, because I remember in high school, the requirement was to, you know, do 4 years of a language. And most of us, we'd start learning languages in middle school. So that, you know, that language, those language classes, you know, was actually part of the language requirement for high school. We weren't required to take languages in middle school, but many of us took it earlier just because. And then some people, I guess, you know, when they fulfill, you know, a lot of the people, when they fulfilled the 4-year requirement, they stopped. Kind of like with music, you know, I had a lot of people I did music with, you know, when I was 9, they stopped eventually, but that's another story. But, and yeah, I think that it is really important because I find that, I think, you know, a lot of people, what I think I've seen a lot of people say about the United States as well in terms of language learning is that we feel that it's so big that, you know, the country's so big and we only pretty much, you know, the official language is only English pretty much. I mean, there are other languages that are spoken there too, but it's like, you know, it's not really encouraged. Like people aren't encouraged to study that language long term. You know, I guess in general. And also, there's some school programs that may not have like the adequate you know resources to even support you know language learning as well. Because I was lucky enough to go to you know really good you know school district in Maryland that had like one of the highest graduation rates in the country. So there's that and also, I think it really just boils down to it in a way. I think it also boils down to motivation because, you know, if you honestly love the language, you'll still keep doing it. As opposed to if you don't, then you'll just do your required amount and then you'll stop. And with my personal experience with, you know, speaking French here is that, you know, I think it's because I don't have I don't have an American accent when I speak French, so people automatically assume that I guess I'm from here because um, they ask me questions sometimes like how to get somewhere or what train stop is going, and I would say I don't know, but because I honestly don't know, but I think that because I don't have an accent and because people assume that I'm from here, I've never had issues like with you know, people. If anything, when I tell them I'm American, then they'll be like, oh well, you speak very very well. You speak French very very well. So if anything, I feel like I just haven't had much of an issues here. I feel like I'm kind of an anomaly in this whole situation though. But yeah.
Can you read that for me, anybody?
Tu pars, François, je pose. Camerounais, salut mon frère.
He says he hopes I speak French, or I'm supposed to speak French, because when you say you're from Cameroon, most people just like, the thing is, Cameroon is French and English, but the majority speaks French because it's eight states that speak French and just 2 that speak English. So when you say you're from Cameroon, everyone just like, oh, tu parles français, mon frère. So I'm like, okay. No, but I'm still learning, Jean. I'm still learning French. I just started again because I started a while back and I stopped. So now I'm going to start again. So hopefully we can talk in French in some months to come.
Well, you know what? Then that might be a good place for us to bookmark this. I really appreciate what everybody did today. I really appreciated getting we got to do more of a deep dive into Paris. We got to do more of a deep dive into, do you guys have pictures of Paris and where you go and what to do? So what I want to do is have one where we just talk about, we got to the language part, but I want to hear more about the city.
Yeah, I'm still in the process of exploring the city more myself.
Because if you got pictures, you can
to do it as much as I wanted to because of the pandemic. I was going to, go to more, revisit some of the museums I've been to already, but because of the pandemic. I'm going to do that over the summer, obviously, because like the Louvre, for example, and the Musée d'Orsay, that opened up. That opened up this past week, actually. So,
I'm not going any place that closed in. Brazil is opening slow, but I'm still I'm fortunate because of my career. I can do everything from home. But it's one of those things. I'm not that guy. I'm not trying to take a whole lot of chances. I'm not going out like that. I can go across the street and get a bunch of meat and bring it back to cook. I can order everything else. So,
yeah.
Team, thank you. Does anybody? Let's do this. Laris, last words. I'm going to go down the rows.
Oh, guys, wish me luck in my journey, and hopefully I'll get some help from the French speakers.
Maya?
Bonne chance, Lars, for your journey in learning French.
Yeah.
I think that, as long as you meet people, if you speak French or willing to help you, obviously, you'll be fine, I'd say.
Yeah, hope so.
Rody.
And for me, well, I guess we're all wishing Lars good luck in his French learning adventures. And we should definitely keep in touch because I could, there's so many persons I could put you in touch with. There's even a friend of mine who hosts like a sort of virtual cafe, language cafe, where you can just log in and practice your language. It's called Fluentry. So, there's so many resources out there, so I could link you up for Maya. I'll probably be going to Paris in a few weeks, so if ever we can grab a coffee, it'd be great.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So
I'm still going to be here this summer. Yeah.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you so much for the invitation as well, Lisa.
So the last thing I'll leave you guys with then is everyone on this channel who comes in, they know I talk quite a bit about world travel and where to go and what to do and making money. And I have a lot of fun here on my YouTube page. Most of the technical information I share with people on the inside out of how to deal with the money, how to get paperwork, passports, I do on my Patreon. I tell people, and actually it's right there in the comments. I tell people this all the time. My Patreon is a lot less fun than my YouTube. Let me say it again. Patreon is a lot less fun than YouTube because people come here because they're looking for technical information on the things that I do and my companies do. I'll show you some of the more popular things that have come through. My friends who are professional in Forex talk about auto trading and learning through Forex, things like that. Subject matter expert is how I've taught some people how to monetize what they do, particularly digitally now, because everybody's a digital nomad, whether they want to or not. You know what? There was a big one that was one of the most popular this one. People who want to travel the world don't know that there is a method that you have to use to get background checks for immigration and expat visas from the United States federal government and your local police station. Most people don't know that until it's too late. They end up spending a lot of money trying to figure out how to do it at the last minute. And that's one of the things that my company does. So you know what? Judge Zilla, thank you for the compliment. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click end broadcast, and we're going to go back behind the curtain. And we're going to map out a time to do this again so we can talk more about just the city of Paris. Actually, I have a better idea. Why don't we just do it on Lars's channel? That'll be awesome, too. So we'll talk about that later. All right, everybody?
All right. Okay.
Be safe wherever you are. Thank